The game is not even out yet, and already Mass Effect Andromeda has brought the trolls out from under the bridge. Let's chat about it in the comments below, but first, my opinion. I'm Tarmack, and this is Feature Creep. Electronic Arts put their latest offering, Mass Effect Andromeda, up for a nice little trial for those folks who subscribe to the Origin Access program, a way of effectively renting a bunch of EA games, and immediately it became apparent that the game was going to be a controversial one. Stories began popping up both extremely in favor and extremely against the title all over game media, with those in favor saying the game was overwhelming, and those against attacking it on more objective means. The attacks on Andromeda came primarily in the form of animations and dialogue, something of a meme already, the way characters are seen to walk or waddle downstairs, the way facial animations look like they were pieced together by someone who took their inspiration from a pond filled with koi, and such. Now, I need to be clear and say that I do not have an opinion on the game that I'm ready to share. However, the animations and some of the dialogue we've seen to date is not far removed from reality, and is understandable how gamers who have been looking forward to the next iteration in the Mass Effect series for years now are less than happy. From understandable, though, quickly transitioning into dangerous territory, something of a witch hunt began after a rather intrepid blogger found that a former Electronic Arts employee had put down that she was the lead facial animator for Mass Effect Andromeda on her LinkedIn and Twitter pages. You know, an article's classy when it contains the phrase, quote, "Andromeda looks like cancer," end quote. Personally, having seen what cancer does to a person, I find that particular comparison logically devoid of thought. After combing through the LinkedIn page of this lead facial animator, one Ali Rosemary Leost, and discovering that her past history didn't involve any previous game experience, folks began to lose their minds. She had a bunch of animation experience going back about 5 years, but none in the game industry, and clearly the Internet Inspector Gadget division knows that the only important thing in hiring animators is their LinkedIn profile. I don't know why I'm bothering to mention all of this, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Internet sleuthing has been responsible for far more misery than it has solved, as arrogant, blithering idiots scamper around putting pieces of evidence together to build a narrative that they had in their mind before they began. What someone's LinkedIn profile says and what they are capable of and hired by a company to do are not always connected, though in this case, an unexpected correction happened. Aaron Flynn, the general manager of BioWare, had to come out and drop a wee bit of public relations. Quote, "Recently, a former EA employee was misidentified as a lead member of the Mass Effect Andromeda development team. These reports are false," end quote. He then went on to state that attacking people in the way as was being done is never acceptable. On this point, and many others I suspect, Flynn and I wholeheartedly agree. Now, I'm only including Ali's name here because a fair bit of criticism is deserved on her part. I don't have a problem dropping shame on people online when they do stupid things, but I've seen folks attack Flynn already on this, claiming that he's lying. Let me pose a question to you in that case, as I've encountered something of a paradox that's difficult to square with what logic has been peddled thus far. If Flynn is lying when he says she wasn't a lead, which is a verifiable claim by the way that'll only take a few minutes with the Mass Effect Andromeda credits, then you're assuming that Ms. Leost is telling the truth. And of the two of them, who has more to lose? Someone puffing up their resume? Or the general manager of BioWare who would be liable for defamation, damaging someone's career by intentionally and falsely downgrading their role on a game? But that's not where this story turns nasty. It turns nasty when a group of folks switch from critique to outright harassment and death threats. Look, I'm not here to defend what Ali decided to put down on her Twitter and LinkedIn profile. It's garbage to lie about a role you have in developing a game because it's disrespectful to the gaming public and extremely disrespectful to your fellow game developers. However, there is nothing, absolutely not a single possible occurrence in the game industry where a death threat is a justifiable action. If you're the kind of person who feels that it's okay to go after another human being through death threats, rape threats, and active harassment, get yourself down to the doctor because it's time for the hug me jacket in the soft room. Your brain is faulty and you're a terrible person. BioWare is no stranger to controversy with the Mass Effect series, and this isn't the first time that they've had developers get death threats. Numerous instances occurred during the infamous bad ending in Mass Effect 3 for starters. Former BioWare writer Jennifer Hepler received threats directed at her children because people didn't like Dragon Age 2. Let that sink in. Ignorant bell-end gamers so upset that a video game didn't meet their expectations threatened to kill her children. This is what happens when you identify yourself by the games that you're a fan of. I'll go back even further. Shortly after my tenure at BioWare doing QA on Jade Empire, I went on to be a moderator of their forums. I received my own death threat, which at the time I wrote off as some blithering child upset that their thread got locked. Over a thread getting locked, folks. Culture of outrage indeed. And BioWare's not alone. Take a look at the story of Wooly, the guy who's in charge of the game Cube World, and look into the threats that he's received. Look into the Xbox Live community manager who received death threats when a Call of Duty gun had its stats changed. The constant stream of abuse that Blizzard developers get every time a patch does or doesn't come out for WoW, Overwatch, Diablo, or any other game they make. Time and time again of threats being made for the most mundane of reasons. This is actually very similar to the reason why I believe that children should be taught how to swear properly, what words mean, when to use them. Because if your go-to word is fuck and it comes out of your mouth at the slightest provocation, it loses any real impact. By the same token, if you threaten someone's life over bad facial animations in a video game because they made a false claim on their Twitter account of how prestigious their job was at a game company, where do you go from there? When your dial only has 0 and 11 on it, what do you do when something actually matters? Let's bring that context back to this situation. Mass Effect Andromeda is a big game. Whether it's a good game still remains to be seen, but it is undeniably a very large-scale project requiring an awful lot of people to make it happen. So even if this embellished lead facial animator had significant influence over the animations we've seen so far in the trial, the producers and director had to sign off on it. If Andromeda is bad, it's not because of an animator, because if that animator was doing such terrible work that the higher-ups on the game disliked, they would have been let go. It's as simple as that. From the legal perspective, death threats are of course illegal. I often focus on some legal-related issues, and in the past I've run a few inquiries through my own circles on why this kind of thing isn't prosecuted more. Quite simply, it's because a death threat requires the means to complete. In order for a death threat to actually necessitate police involvement in prosecution, the person who issued the threat has to have the means to carry it out. If you threaten someone's life on the street, you have the means because they're right there in front of you. If you threaten someone online, the prosecution needs to prove that you know how to find the person and the means to get to where they are in order to carry out some kind of attack. In the case of a game developer, merely knowing where they work is a plausible source of the means to carry it out, but when you're under a deluge of hundreds of varying threats, where do you even begin? When you've sent subpoenas to Twitter for subscriber information, and then to internet service providers for account holders, and then executed a warrant at a person's house only to find out it was some 13-year-old kid in a basement somewhere, it makes the whole process so cumbersome that you were never going to catch the one who was actually serious. And in doing so, you leave alone all of the not serious ones where the person being harassed is now afraid to go outside because nothing is being done. There is a need for more robust methods for holding people to account for the things they say online. This is one of the areas, much like copyright and anti-circumvention, where the law is well behind the times. And I think that the first course of action is squarely in the hands of the video game industry itself, but perhaps by way of the Electronic Frontier Foundation or Electronic Software Association, consumer and industry advocate groups. If game developers were to band together in an attempt to squash this kind of thing in collaboration with sites like Twitter, Google, Facebook, a very concerted effort could be made to draw a hard line in the sand on harassment. It would need to start with an outright and immediate ban for any user engaging in direct threats against another person. The companies would need to take this seriously, and frankly, I don't think that they're doing enough. As it stands, open, unveiled threats remain directed at Ms. Liost, while Twitter remains silent, watching for users to report accounts that will at most get a temporary suspension. Look, if Mass Effect Andromeda is genuinely a bad game, it will get panned, and rightly so. But the problem of overinvested gamers remains, regardless of that fact. The problem, the issue, the stumbling block with the game industry is a very peculiar subset of its customer base. When a game is bad, we should, and most well-adjusted gamers do, notice that it's bad, comment that it's bad, and then move on to the next game. There are so many games coming out that getting overinvested in one franchise is a bit silly. This is the endline fault of a topic I covered not all that long ago about something I coined as the forever game. A game that for the time being a player cannot see themselves ever moving beyond. That's not to say that it will affect every person negatively to have such a narrow point view on a particular game or franchise, but it sure seems to increase or at least centralize and focus the number of knuckle-draggers looking to go after someone else to deal with the betrayal that inevitably comes when you've convinced yourself that your choice in gaming is the perfect one. Harassment online is bad. I believe the overwhelming majority of us know that. So what can gamers do without congregating under a meaningless hashtag to combat this issue? Does it need petitions to the EFF or game developers directly? Do we need government involvement ultimately to legislate new rules that cover long-distance threats? Let's chat about it down in the comments. Feature Creep is a regular show on the channel, provided free of YouTube ads, courtesy of the generosity of a bunch of folks on Patreon, and I cannot begin to express my gratitude for that support. Thanks for watching. That's all I have to say. Tarmack out.